Hi there, CoronaTV viewers. I'm Johnny Damon.
You're my bobblehead Joel today, just nod up and down if you agree. Welcome to the show, Mitch Joel. How are you?
Happy birthday to you.
And just look at those washboard abs.
I know, right? Oh yeah, this is the fittest I've ever been in my life, you know.
Happy birthday from Johnny Damon.
First of all, let's just do the elbow bump. Happy Thursday, everybody. It is time for Corona TV, and I hope you guys are well, doing okay. I'm pretty excited because I have Mr. Christopher S. Penn as my guest, and to quote Seth Sparks, let's get nerdy. I don't know why he's saying that. Is he calling me a nerd? Because that is not, I think Chris maybe would agree with me. We're not nerds, we're geeks. Are we? I don't know, maybe I once saw there was a difference between whether you were a geek, a nerd, a dweeb. I don't even know what the difference is. But all I know is Chris is remarkably insightful, intelligent, knowledgeable, and wise. And I'm looking forward to him sharing the knowledge with us today. So it's going to be a good show. It's going to be not a good show. It's going to be a great show. And I'm glad we're together, as always. It means a lot to me to have you here. Today is National Get to Know Your Customers Day. And I think it's an interesting one, right? Because, you know, we're at a time now where we really have to think carefully about, I mean, you heard Charlene Lee talk about future customers. Who are your current customers? Who are your future customers? Are they the same but changing? Are they different? But now, during this downtime, this is the time for us to get to know them, to pick up the phone, to do that management by walkabout, the old Sam Walton walking up and down the virtual aisles. This is a time for us to, you know, get better at customer service, not worse. And of course, the reality is, and I think we all know this, that we've gotten a lot worse at it, and we need to change that. Just to tell you briefly about Chris. He's the co-founder and chief data scientist at Trust Insights. I've got to update this even more. He's a multiple author. He's the host of Marketing Over Coffee. He's got a great daily video show that he was telling me about. You Ask, I Answer. Unbelievable how much he does. And we'll talk about all of that on the show today. Chris is my Thursday interview, of course, and then Brian Kramer tomorrow, rounding off what has been, I think for me, just an amazing week. I've learned so much, new perspectives from new friends, old friends. It's just been terrific. One of the things that I've really looked to do is to boost the relationship between us. And one of the ways you can do that, I basically made a decision to use my weekly newsletter to really be a lot more aligned and integrated with Corona TV. So if you'd like to receive that weekly newsletter, and there may be other stuff as well if you already are receiving it, but if not, if you're in North America, please just text the word Corona TV to 66866, or you can go to josephjaffe.com/subscribe to subscribe to the newsletter. As always, a bunch of birthdays on Facebook and LinkedIn, and I'm looking and scanning. I see Shelby Bonney. The last time I saw that name was, wow, 20 years ago in the formation of CNET. So I hope you're good and having a good birthday. And then, of course, to all my contacts on LinkedIn as well, just want to wish you guys a happy birthday and an inspired and inspiring birthday for you. Well, now we come to the seated soliloquy. And as you know, the seated soliloquy always has something to do with my guest. And considering my guest is a little bit of an expert, a subject matter expert in AI, artificial intelligence, I decided to call this one Intelligently Artificial. You know, there's nothing actually artificial about intelligence. See what I just did there? Good, because I'm not really sure I saw it myself. There are some things that humans are just not good at or even capable of. I mean, that's why and where we need machines, right? So where does AI fit into all of this thinking? Well, I think AI is probably one of those seemingly misunderstood categories. Thankfully, less cliched and overused and abused than the word blockchain. That makes me think of an old adage. You know, AI is like boys talking about sex. They all talk about it, but no one is really doing it. And if they are, they're certainly not doing it right. A while back, I came up with this categorization for AI that follows a familiar crawl, walk, run methodology. The first category is what I call automation, and it's probably what the majority of projects that call themselves AI fits into. In this category, the machines are dumb. We control them. We tell them what to do, and they do it. And they don't grumble and they don't complain. They make our lives easier, like an easy pass replacing a toll booth operator, for example. The second category is augmentation. And in this category, machines and humans work together as partners. The machines don't just make our lives easier, they make our lives better. And specifically, they make our customers' lives better. Think about key insights, flags, or notifications, which can be handed off to human operators to better serve their markets. Now, the final category is called auguration. And this is real AI. And it's where humans are no longer necessary or required in order to produce a transformational outcome. Some might call it deep learning, where big data is really huge data, but it's less about the processing or quantity and more about the interpretation or quality. Personally, I don't think we're close to this phase yet, but it does represent a moment in time. Ray Kurzweil might call this the singularity, where hell could open the pod bay doors and alleviate Elon Musk's fear of humanity's biggest existential threat and summoning the demon, maybe even cure COVID. So that's the upside, even recognizing maybe the downside of this world and this new exciting category, technology-infused category called AI. Well, he's probably going to debunk everything that I just said. He might agree with some of it, but maybe he can tell us exactly where on that continuum we actually live or exist right now. Christopher S. Penn is an authority on analytics, digital marketing, marketing technology, data science, and machine learning. Believe me, he is an expert in all of them. He's a recognized thought leader, best-selling author, and keynote speaker. He has shaped 5 key fields in the marketing industry: Google Analytics adoption, data-driven marketing and PR, modern email marketing, marketing data science, and artificial intelligence, machine learning, and marketing. And again, he has done all of those. A Brand 24 top 100 digital marketer and Analytica top 100 AI in marketing influencer, Penn is co-host of the award-winning Marketing Over Coffee marketing podcast. I've been privileged enough to be on it many times, and his latest book is AI for Marketers. So without further ado, let me welcome him onto the show. Welcome, Mr. Christopher S. Penn.
Thanks for having me, sir.
That is a hell of an intro, and I had to say multiple times, and it's all true, because you really have done all of these things, and some of them are like really in the sausage factory, if you will, of digital marketing.
I suppose so. I've never actually seen a sausage factory, so I don't know.
I think if you did see a sausage factory, you would never eat a sausage again. So maybe that's a good thing.
It's entirely possible.
So how are you?
You know, I'm not in a hospital or a morgue, so I'm good. You know, everything on top of that's gravy.
I suppose when you think about it that way, that is absolutely true. Now, there are a ton of comments that have come in, and I'm going to have to, this is going to be really difficult to have to sift through this, but there are questions coming in. You know, Bob, who is a regular on the show, is really upset about missing today. He didn't even RSVP his regrets. So there will be letters. He's got a question for you, which I might ask you later if there's time. But I know that we actually are a little bit short of time compared to my normal episode. So we'll try and cover everything. Mr. Steve Garfield, he's basically already giving you a deserved plug, which is your lunchtime pandemic reading newsletter, no doubt. And I will provide links to everything that you need. And Ship Griffin said, I hope to understand at least a few minutes of today's talk and not have too much go way over my head. That beautiful bald head of his. And Joey said hi as well. So a lot of people are here for you, Chris. I do want to actually ask you, what did you think of the monologue in terms of being able to, almost acknowledge, I guess, that AI, for the most part, it's really not AI in the true or purest definition, and we're maybe sometimes confusing things like automation or maybe even augmentation as opposed to what I call auguration, moving towards the singularity.
Well, so there's a bunch of different ways to look at it, but the generally accepted definition of AI is that you are having a machine perform functions that normally human intelligence would do. So if you can see me on the video and you can differentiate me from the background, you're using vision, right? And that would be computer vision, could be the equivalent in AI. If you can hear the sound of my voice and it makes sense to you, you are doing, as a human, language processing. Machines would do natural language processing. And all these fall under the bucket of what's called machine learning, which is a subset of AI. Fundamentally, the core heart of AI is that a machine is learning from information we give it and then essentially writing its own software, right? We'll talk about things like, neural networks and models and things, but they're just fancy terms for software. The output of any AI system is the software that the machine generates. Now, there are two types of AI. There's narrow, which is algorithms and software that do a specific task, like speech recognition or text recognition, image recognition. And then there's a wide or general, artificial general intelligence, which is what you're talking about, where a machine starts to achieve sentience, sapience, consciousness. We're fairly far away from that part because we don't have the computational ability to do that right now. And now this is opinion and speculation. That will happen once we've developed effective quantum computing, effective and stable, because the nature of the human brain is that the human brain is fundamentally, it's a neural network, hence what we call it in the machines, of a massively parallel chemical computer. Our brains are chemical computers. They're biochemical in nature. They're very slow, but because there's billions and billions of individual processors linked together, they can make decisions, and those processors operate in an analog way. When you look at how a synapse fires in the brain, it doesn't go like 0-1. If there's actually actuation potentials that when the synaptic gap is crossed by an electrical charge. Quantum computing is going to be what allows us to do that with machines, because right now machines still fundamentally process serially, meaning making one decision at a time. And like your brand new fancy laptop probably only has 8 cores, right, in its processor, which means it really functionally has like 8 brain cells. They're very fast brain cells,
Wow.
but there's only 8 of them. A quantum computer, because of the nature of things like entanglement and superposition, allow you to have functionally as many brain cells as a human brain would, because of the way that, once we get to 1,000 qubit computers, and at that point, you are now talking about enough computational power to achieve sentience, to achieve intelligence. How far away are we from this? We don't know. It could be 5 years. It could be 10 years. IBM has a number of usable quantum computers now, but there's still 10 and 20 qubit computers that functionally are slower than the state-of-the-art standard silicon computers.
Okay, Seth, you were right. We got geeky. We got nerdy. That was, I was going to say, but that's exactly what I said in my monologue. No, I'm kidding. But I think it's interesting though, and I also, what I wanted to touch on there was this idea of, there's been like people like Elon Musk, when he's not supporting Kanye West to become president, or burrowing tunnels under LA, he's warned us about this Armageddon, the hell moment as well. Where do you kind of fit in in terms of Elon Musk's opinion and his fears?
Here's the thing. I prefer to stick with the problems that we have now and not borrow trouble from the future. Should we be concerned about things like that? Sure. We have problems in AI now. One of the biggest problems we have in AI today is bias. Remember, machine learning is fundamentally about taking data that exists, feeding it to a machine and saying, write software based on the data that I'm giving you. It still follows garbage in, garbage out, which means that, for example, in 2018, Amazon tried to write a predictive algorithm for screening resumes to speed up the hiring process. They trained it on a bunch of their existing employees. And then what happened? The algorithm immediately stopped hiring women. Why? Because they trained on a resume pool saying 95% male. So, of course, you fed it a biased data set. You got a biased model out of it, and your model is reinforcing that bias. And there's so much bias in all of our data, some of which is almost impossible to counteract. So, real simple example that's very relevant today. Black Americans and their healthcare that have been so systematically disadvantaged for hundreds of years that if you are trying to optimize healthcare outcomes for Black Americans, you fundamentally cannot use Black American healthcare data because the system that surrounds that data set is so biased against them that all of the outcomes in the data set are still wrong, right? So you almost have to take a data set from like white Americans, anonymize or flip the racial bit, and then shove that into the data set to say, okay, you're going to train on the best possible outcome rather than the outcome that matches the target audience, because all the data we have about the target audience is wrong. So that's an example of where these machines and these algorithms and the work we're doing can reinforce and make existing problems worse. And that's a problem that we have today that the field as a whole is trying to deal with. And it's in every industry. I was at a conference in Minneapolis, and there was this insurance company that was talking about how they were trying to optimize their marketing algorithms for the best possible customers. And they said, we're not allowed to have differential pricing based on, age or gender or, pretty much any protected class. But we've targeted our marketing. They're so proud of themselves. We've targeted our marketing to only target the best customers. And when you look at the data set, you go, you know what, you guys, you just reinvented redlining. Congratulations. That's still illegal. For those who are not familiar, redlining was a 1930s practice by insurance companies and banks of taking a map, drawing red lines around typically the black sections of the cities and say, we're not going to do business here. And to have people on stage boasting about this, that they've reinvented redlining, is appalling. And, so these are the problems that we have today in AI and machine learning and, frankly, data science and just data, period. And if we don't fix them now, they're going to make things worse.
It's very relevant what you're saying, because I had Lane Green on the show, and he is the language columnist and an editor at The Economist. And he actually spoke about similar things, which is how a researcher at one of the colleges fed all of these words that had been used to describe athletes. And almost with 100% precision and accuracy, the computer or the program would determine whether, in fact, the athlete was black or white, based on certain ingrained biases. And then, of course, there's the other famous example of the Microsoft, AI bot that turned out to be incredibly racist.
It didn't turn out to be. It was trained that way by the users.
Oh, so they basically just fed it in and it said, well, this is clearly relevant and this is how I need to respond.
Yep, that was Microsoft Tay in 2016. And that is a great example, Joseph, of poisoning in AI, where you can take the incoming data and cause the model to drift so far that it becomes like a Hitler bot very, very quickly. And again, if data scientists and AI engineers not thinking about this and asking themselves constantly, what could go wrong? How could this be abused? How could this be tricked? Then you end up with systems exactly like that, but in places like hiring, where you don't want, like a Twitter bot becoming racist is unpleasant. A hiring system becoming racist is a problem.
Yeah, good point. Patrick on LinkedIn said humans are irrational by nature, so is the data output. So it seems we would have to teach AI to a moral standard we ourselves can't live up to. ? Exclamation point.
Yep. And Yeah, the challenge with that is you also have to agree what is moral. And that is a very, very thorny problem. Like even in just something as simple as religious systems, what Buddhism considers immoral and what Christianity considers immoral are different, right? Buddhists say you ain't allowed to eat meat, and you know a whole bunch of Christians who say bring the cows over. And so the question is, whose data set do you train on, and how do you come to those conventions? I think pretty much the only major principle that crosses almost every religion is the golden rule. I think, as far as I know, that's like the only thing that pretty much everybody has in common. Whether it's Islam or Zoroastrianism or Buddhism, it's like do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. That's about it.
Love your neighbor as you love yourself.
And we can't agree on pretty much anything else. So, to Patrick's point, who gets to agree on that? What we have and what we're seeing right now, particularly in the United States, is whoever's in charge is going to impose essentially their view of the world, their morals and their ethics into how they want things like government systems to run. We see this in corporations. The corporate culture of a company reflects the people who are running it. And some of those folks are not would fail, most moral checklists on it pretty quickly. But yet they're still in charge. So how do we define that? Who decides that? And who decides that this outcome is okay or not? Even in something as simple as conservatism versus liberalism, you have very different ideas about how to achieve a positive outcome. Who gets to be in charge of that? Is it whoever's in office at the moment? So you're going to have a whole bunch of really, really, really conflicting AI solutions out there.
And then I guess is the fallibility and the inconsistency of the humanoid versus the machine, right? When there are so many different levels of interpretation and subjectivity versus a much more colder, brittle, harder approach, which is if then, and if not, then something else.
At the end of the day, I think you're probably going to have to approach it somewhat similarly to medicine, right? In the idea of the Hippocratic Oath, and just try not to make the world a worse place with some of this stuff, and clearly identify things which cause harm. That to me is like the baseline, the lowest possible bar is like try to create systems that don't cause harm, and then you can have we should have extensive, vigorous debates about what goes beyond that. But at the very least, don't make the world a worse place. And there are plenty of people and systems, things that are doing exactly that.
So you guys thought you were going to listen to Chris talk about data and AI, but in fact you're getting a lesson in civics, in philosophy, in morality, which is amazing, because in a way it's a beautiful way to demonstrate how everything should fit together. We should be using data to make better decisions, to be smarter, and to treat people better. You posted this on Facebook earlier, and I don't know if people will be able to see it too clearly, but I think it was a two-part post, right, Chris? You started off by showing the actual map, and if we have a look at the key, we'll just use our voice of God at the moment, that now we had trending better, caution warranted, trending poorly, and uncontrolled spread, the deep purple.
It's called bruised red. They called it bruised red is the name of that color.
Man, and then you posted this a little. Now that chart has a little call out. Maybe talk a little bit about what that call out for those people that aren't following what's been going on.
So what has happened, and this was confirmed by a bunch of epidemiologists and virologists on Twitter, is that hospitalization data used to be reported to the CDC, and then was made public in a CDC Power BI dashboard on the CDC website of the number of people hospitalized and intensive care units and things like that. And these tracking tools that people have built, that is one of the inputs to determine is a state doing better or worse in terms of its ability to treat COVID-19. If your ICUs, for example, are completely full, you are going to get more deaths, because what has made COVID-19 less or more deadly has not been the disease, but our ability to treat in a timely fashion and to stage interventions with things like ventilators, oxygen therapy, dexamethasone, for example, remdesivir. And by the way, for anyone listening, I want to be completely clear, I am in no way, shape, or form a medical professional of any kind. Please go follow people like Dr. Scott Gottlieb, Dr. Eric Ding, Dr. Caitlin Rivers on Twitter if you want to listen to it from the actual experts themselves. I just read this stuff a lot. So that said, when an ICU or a hospital system is at capacity, then you're putting out beds and tents and parking lots and things like that. And that's when you start to see death rates go up. We saw it in China, we saw it in Italy, we saw it in New York City. Once places got to capacity, death rates go up because you just can't deliver the same standard of care. There's too many patients, not enough healthcare professionals. And the way to figure out how you're doing is to look at things like hospitalization data. So President Trump issued an executive mandate. It was filtered through Health and Human Services that all hospitalization data now must go straight to Health and Human Services and bypass the CDC, and critically not be publicly available. And this is the part where, this morning I was sending notes to my senators and House Representatives folks, saying, please, lobby and petition to reverse this mandate, because the general public needs to see how bad or good things are in their locale so that they can make informed decisions about whether you should even leave your house or not, right? Like, if your ICU in your region is full, play super safe, right? Even if your locale is theoretically in stage 3 of the reopening, you should be behaving as though it's day 1, because your local hospital system cannot accommodate you. When we talk about reopening, we are not talking about the disease is less dangerous. No, in fact, the disease is slightly more dangerous now than it was at the beginning because of a fairly substantial mutation about 2 months ago. So when we say reopening, it just means there's room at the hospital for you to be intubated. In no way should you be treating this as any less seriously. And if your hospital is full, you really better play it safe. And if we don't have this data, you can't make that decision. And so these are concerns that, this is not this should not be a political thing. It has become a political thing because our current chief executive is so concerned about his self-image and what people think, and not concerned about science and data and paying attention to what the data says, that it's turned into this football. Instead of saying, here's the data, everybody, let's all play together, let's all work together, let's all use the data together to make data-informed decisions.
I mean, I think that's so well said. And it also, truth be told, right, we have to bring it all the way back to testing. Because if you understand the relationship between testing, hospitalization, and unfortunately death, that's when you're in a better position through the data to make better informed decisions. And as you say, maybe just, hey, you might want to stay home today. But I love how you brought all of this back to the golden rule. And recognizing that with all of look, you can't hide from the truth. That's why I call you the straight shooter, the truth teller. But you can actually use it to liberate yourself, set yourself free, and set others free by using it to make smart decisions. And it's funny. I mean, Chip says going back to it's not just data and analytics, but AI. He said, doesn't machine learning encourage the status quo? It seems by definition to be inside the box analysis that studies past behavior to draw conclusions. So where do you see this idea of projecting, not just projecting death, but being able to extrapolate and create these scenarios that we can actually live by? And by the way, let me just caveat that. We've seen enough of these highly intelligent models, right, Chris, that are warning us about 140,000 deaths and 220,000 deaths. Should that not be enough for us to take action?
Should be. So to Chip's question, it depends on the size of the box. If you are training on a small data set, then yes, you're going to repeat what's in that data set. If you're training on a very large data set, then the boundaries of that box may exceed what it is that you're trying to achieve. For example, if you're trying to train an AI to write, say, a press release, as a very simple example, and you train it only on press releases, yes, you're going to have it repeat what is in other press releases. However, if you train it on the entire corpus of Wikipedia, then you have a much wider pool of text to choose from, and it may come up with things that would not be in press releases alone. So it really depends on the problem you're trying to solve and the box. Where this has direct relevance right now to what's going on with the pandemic is that, for example, IBM is doing some fantastic work in genome sequencing with the cooperation of the CDC and GIS Aid and a bunch of other agencies, where as these genomes come in, they're sequencing them and they're training their own modeling software to look for mutations, to be able to spot trends in mutations along this. I'm going to get even nerdier, and I, again, not a doctor. I'm literally repeating almost verbatim what a PhD virologist friend of mine said. A virus is a strand of RNA, which is, if you think about it, is like say a bunch of Lego blocks chained together, and there are certain spots that have a lot of Legos tied to them. These are called open reading frames, and they correspond to proteins, where these proteins do things like attach to cells and stuff. Mutations happen all the time. They happen frequently with a virus. And every little mutation can be tracked over time to see where did this mutation come from. That's how we know, for example, that the virus that originally entered the United States did come from China, but the predominant strain that came into New York was from Europe. And the European strain has a substantial mutation, which in the literature is called D614G. And what that mutation does is it makes it more transmissible. Not many are worse, better or worse in terms of outcome, but it makes it more contagious. And that's, if you look in, for example, if you go to nextstrain.org, you can see the D614G mutation is now the dominant form of this virus. It has changed since it started in China. With these open reading frames, these attachment points, it's kind of like playing darts. If you throw a dart and you hit the outside of the board and nothing happens, you throw a dart in the middle of the board, bullseye, right? You score a lot of points. When a mutation occurs inside of an open reading frame on a protein, it can drastically change what that protein does. It can make the virus just come apart, right? You know, it's like, oh crap, you know, the thing just stops working, and that mutation dies away. Or like it did with D614G, it makes the virus much more effective and resilient to outside factors and makes it more contagious, which is bad. You can also have things where it makes it deadlier. The SARS-CoV-2 virus, and now this is opinion, is an almost perfect virus because it is highly contagious and it's not very lethal, right? A virus does a really crappy job of surviving if it kills everybody it comes in contact with, right? Because there's no hosts and the virus can't replicate. If, on the other hand, you're like an influenza or something where you're just persistently infecting everybody all the time, you're a very successful organism from a biology perspective. And so the SARS-CoV-2 virus is really successful. And it's covered the planet in about 6 months. And absent an effective vaccine, which is in doubt, this could be with us like influenza for the remainder of our civilization.
So Chris, let's talk about hope and positivity and optimism. Let's talk about a solution amidst that reality of dealing with a perfect virus, with a lack of data now coming from, you know, for political reasons. It seems pretty, you know, foreboding and doomy and gloomy. If our government is not going to solve the problem, if big business is not necessarily going to solve the problem unless they're forced kicking and screaming through the Defense Production Act, why are startups and technologists and technology and smart people like you and you solving the problem? And I just want to show you this as a little benchmark. Very early in CoronaTV, I had Chad Dick on from Eat Big Fish, and he actually spoke about using, you know, just different thinking. You know, in this case, you know, the fact that if contact tracing is not going to be coming from a centralized source, why aren't we hacking and cobbling together solutions like, for example, you know, Flew Near You, to almost create a self-policed or a community, you know, consumer-generated tracing? Why are we not seeing that level of innovation coming from us, you know, from the innovation sector?
From the medical side, you don't want that people just willy-nilly attempting to create biological solutions. You will literally get a zombie movie out of that. And that's true of anything where you require deep subject matter expertise, right? Where you want people who have PhDs, who are actual scientists doing the actual work, leading to the forefront. The technologists can certainly help. The technologists can lend their assistance for things like machine learning algorithms, things that can process the data faster. But even still, you want experts being in charge of that. For everything else, we have a second pandemic that's underneath the current one. And this was actually warned about. Johns Hopkins University, the Center for Health Security, did a fantastic exercise, which the conspiracy theorists have all started ranting about, back in October of 2019 called Event 201. And it was a simulation of a coronavirus-based pandemic. And they basically did like 3 days of war games to talk through how the world could solve this. And one of the things they outlined was that there is a misinformation pandemic that goes alongside the actual disease. And that is everything from people who are spreading batshit crazy stuff like that the virus is being spread by 5G cell phone towers, and that George Soros and Bill Gates are going to try and implant mind control chips in everybody, right? Like, these are legitimate complaints some of these people have. Are they going to install a contact tracing app on their phone and voluntarily cooperate? No. Are they even going to wear a mask to the grocery store? No.
Yeah.
And so you have a tremendous amount of non-compliance within the American culture. Now, here's the hope and optimism and positivity part. In most of the world, like China, Japan, most of Europe, Australia, Canada, citizens are standing in solidarity with each other. They are working together. They are listening to their governments. Their governments are functional. And they are, in some cases, crushing this thing. Like New Zealand is able to put out the fire as soon as it starts. South Korea has been doing an amazing job with contact tracing. And so there are large parts of the world where the disease is under control, even though there's no cure, there's no vaccine, and there are some pharmaceutical interventions. Just the citizens acting together in concert with a coordinated government response is yielding very positive results. There are plenty of examples where this can be done. This is being done, and it's reassuring to see that. Other places like Brazil, Russia, America, kind of screwed, right? Because the citizens are non-compliant. The government response is ineffective or outright harmful. And until you change one of those two things, you're not going to really get a positive outcome. So you expect to see a lot more death and problems in those places where the government's non-functional. And as much as it's nice to think of like a grassroots movement, this kind of thing requires that partnership, but the civic partnership of the citizens with coordinated government response in times of massive crisis. That's really, you need both of them together. I would love to see that a grassroots movement try and put out the fire in America in particular, but it's not going to happen.
Chip says you've been startlingly correct throughout this pandemic, but maybe there is a fortunate part of it, not unfortunately, but fortunate, which is I think you're calling it like you see it, and being very clear about when it's opinion versus fact, and I think being very pragmatic about it in terms of saying, hey, listen, we all can solve this problem, or we can all be part of the problem, but that decision has to be made by all of us, not just by the person at the top, although it sure helps. Going back to your idea of hiring practices and not hiring women, I'm sure you've seen that chart basically saying all the countries that seem to be doing well, guess what, have female leaders, and all the ones that seem to be that are doing really poorly have these alpha male leaders. So let that be a lesson to us.
Yeah, well, that right there is mistaking the symptom for the cause. Countries that are willing to elect a female leader are by nature typically slightly more liberal and have things like really good healthcare. But in fairness, like of the top 33-ish countries in the world by the OECD, the only one that doesn't have anywhere decent healthcare is the United States. I mean, from a healthcare perspective, we're a third world nation. Yeah,
and if you ever drive from JFK into Manhattan, the state of the Van Wyck would probably underscore that as well. You think like, where the hell am I?
Mm-hmm.
War torn, All right. So we could go on forever, and I kind of wish we would. But I thought I'd have a little bit of fun with you to kind of wind down, and then we'll try and spend 10 or 15 minutes in the Zoom after show. Although I hate to even have to tell you. So one is I wanted to talk about. I mean, Chris, as you said in the before we went live, the last time we actually spoke was in the crayon days, the Second Life and the crayon days. But I wanted to I went back and I looked at the evolution of Christopher S. Penn. It rolls off the tongue. Your brand is almost Christopher S. Penn. And I was thinking to myself, well, why are you not Chris Penn? And how did Christopher S. Penn? Well, this is my sleuthing. Number one is, this is maybe why you're not Chris Penn. The late Chris Penn. If you type Chris Penn into Google, well, this is what you see. I went down. I found no Christopher S. Penns amongst it. Then I went and found out that actually chrispenn.com is for sale, but I think that ship has sailed, right? In terms of the fact you don't want to be Chris Penn or chrispenn.com, you are Christopher S. Penn. And so I'm just letting you know, by the way, the domain is for sale. I'm not selling it. So then I went and looked for Christopher Penn. Well, it turns out Christopher Penn is a private art consultant. And I don't know if you're into private art, but I do know that when you go to Christopher S. Penn, what you see is, and I have to tell you honestly, I'm not just saying this. This is this is art. This website, because it is clean except for the bull taking a dump, the no bullshit. But it delivers what you want it to deliver and what it needs to deliver. I loved the way that it hasn't been over designed, but it is so modular and it is so as I said, very succinct. And one thing that I really loved about this, Chris, was how you're directing people very clearly, which is hire me to speak, subscribe to my newsletter, and buy my book. And I think the way that you also delivered the testimonials and were so value and benefits driven, I think a lot of people could learn so much from using the site as a way to model their business development. So I just want to, this is to me the evolution of or understanding why you are in fact Christopher S. Penn and why you deliver so much value to all of your readers and viewers, etc.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's practicality is what it comes down to.
Yeah, big time. So a few more things that I thought were very interesting. One is your book, AI for Marketers, an introduction and primer. I see that you're actually selling it directly and online, which I didn't even know you could do. So I learned something new as well. And obviously the book is available on Amazon too. How have you found this process of actually being able to sell it directly through your website?
Well, it's a heck of a lot more profitable. The service I use is called Gumroad, and they take 5%. Amazon takes between 35 and 70%, depending on which plan you're on. And, it works really well. And they're just starting to get now into subscriptions and memberships and things. So as they roll that out, it is something I'm keeping my eye very carefully on. The challenge and the trick is like, at what point do you monetize? Because obviously the stuff I have personally is a huge feeder for my company, trustinsights.ai. And so I have been very hesitant to push too hard on the easy monetization in favor of giving away more stuff so that it invites people to become aware of the company and use our services, which are, as my friend Tom Webster would say, reassuringly expensive.
That's nice. I love it. Reassuringly expensive. And Dan Nestle said he loves the way that you practically invite people to unsubscribe. Talk a little bit about what that means.
So in the newsletter, you'll find a giant animated GIF of me in a bright orange hat holding up a subscribe button, pointing at it. And there's multiple subscribe links, but it really is just this big, glaring, obvious, huge, full-width graphic. And the point of it is, in the early days, I got really tired of people, sending me back a little nasty game saying, I couldn't find your unsubscribe link, blah, 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 blah. And so, like, okay, I'm going to make an unsubscribe link that is so painfully obvious that if you cannot see it, you need legitimate medical assistance. You probably need to see an optometrist, because it's there. It works for screen readers, etc. Yeah, that was actually the motivation for it. Is like, I just want you to not be confused about how to unsubscribe.
You guys, if you want to spend and make a decision that you will definitely not regret and not need to find the big orange button, you're going to want to subscribe. First of all, if you want to find out about Chris Penn's company, just go to trustinsights.ai. If you want to find out more and go, of course, now you know, don't go to Chris Penn, don't go to Christopher Penn, go to Christopher S. Penn, and find out so much more about him. There's more to you as well, which is you have a little podcast called Marketing Over Coffee, and I got to tell you something. You've been there since the beginning, and you've stayed the course. I've seen podcasts come and go across the sound, Jaffe Juice, but you've stayed the course, and I just found out that you have a video show as well. I mean, there's so much, right? Which is you ask, I answer. So I want you to be able to give that a little bit of a plug as well, and tell people about the video show.
Well, so the video show is an exercise in content creation. It's a daily show that I just answer questions, one question per episode, no more than 10 minutes, and the logic behind it is using what we call the transmedia content framework. You have a piece of video, pull the audio out of it. Now you have a podcast. Take that audio, feed it into transcription software. If you go to trustinsights.ai/otter, OTTER, you can find the transcription software we used. That pulls out closed captions. The closed captions go back to YouTube because YouTube's search engine highly favors videos with closed captions. Hint, hint. And then the text from that also becomes the blog post. So now in the span of 40 minutes in the morning, I create a video that just goes on YouTube, a podcast that's on Libsyn, a blog post that's 1,500 words on my website, and that all of that together allows me to create content at scale without needing more people to do the scaling for me.
Unbelievable. And I was trying to take notes, but I couldn't keep up. So I'm learning this as well, and I think definitely in terms of how to scale and syndicate and productize, I may as well learn from the master. Chris, I've also pasted your Otter link, your referral link as well. If people want to use that, very, very kind of you to share that with all of us as well. I'm going to give you the final word, and then we'll hop over for about 10 minutes. This was, I seem to say it every week, but this was another masterclass, and I'm very, very happy that you were able to come and share some of your time with us.
Thanks for having me. Remember the 3 W's: wear a mask, wash your hands, watch your distance.
There you go. Chris, I will see you next door. And for all of you, we'll be back tomorrow with the final episode this week. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.